Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. My name is Jamira Burley, and as always, I'm joined with my brilliant co-host, Brea Baker. And today we have a conversation about the new war on wisdom.
Yes, we are living in a moment where truth is under attack. From banned books to censored classroom curriculums, anti-intellectualism is no longer subtle. It is incredibly strategic, and the ones paying the price? Us. Black folks, students, educators, queer people, justice seekers.
Yep, whether it's reparations, Palestine, liberation, teaching accurate Black history, anything that questions white supremacy logic is being silenced. And yet Black people have always used knowledge as a survival tool. So today we're asking, how do we protect the truth in a time of political erasure? But first, let's get into the headlines.
Well, speaking of protecting the truth, my first headline is a nod towards the fact that the root is returning to Black ownership.
No.
Thank you to Ashley Allison, Democratic political strategist, former or maybe still current CNN commentator, who just bought back the root. I think this is such an important moment for us to have Black legacy media. We've talked about it often because we are a product of it. By nature of being on the Black Star Network and in community with Roland Martin. But we need more of it. We need to be a part of an ecosystem. And so I'm really excited to see what this will mean for the root and how it'll bring a resurgence of Black-led journalism.
Absolutely. And it's time for us to own our own narratives, right? To be the ones not only being in the story, but creating the story, to facilitate the discussions around it. And I think that's why we need to support Black-owned media in a really serious way, especially right now, where it seems like Black history is something that's always on the chopping block. They never wanted to teach it. And in moments where in recent years where we've finally got a little bit of success in making sure that it's in the classroom and young people are actually learning about their history. Because again, Black history is not just Black history, it's American history, it's world history. So I'm excited to see how that development will continue to elevate other voices and perspectives within the Black diaspora to be able to really articulate how politics and culture and history impacts our lives.
Preach, yes.
So in regards to my first headline of the day, government shutdown, man, it's really, really, really showing its ass. So delays are spreading across major airports across the country because the government shutdown is really putting the strain on airports across in places like Chicago and New Jersey. And it's going to impact everyday travelers to a high degree in recent days. And it's something to think about. Like, I think when government shutdowns finally happen, it makes people realize just how much the federal government fingers are in every aspect of our lives. It's very easy to be like, I'm not political. Well, politics, legislation controls everything. And I think that's scary to see is that the FAA are now having many of its workers call out sick, not showing up to work. And you remember earlier in this administration, there was a number of accidents and crashes that occurred under the Trump administration because of the lack of investment in the FAA. And I think we're going to, unfortunately, probably see a return of just very dangerous and unsafe conditions for travelers.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I know that at Burbank Airport, they had actually had to close down for a couple hours because they had 0 air traffic controllers on shift. And so it was just completely unsafe to let flights go. So that's creating delays. I know there was at least one other airport that had a similar situation. And to your point, I think people, government shutdown sounds so theoretical until you have somewhere to be. You have something to do. And I don't blame the people who are not calling in because they're being expected to show up. They have no idea when their paychecks are going to come back. I hope that by the time this episode is live, the government shutdown is finished, but we have no idea when that will be. And so the reality is you're showing up to work doing full shifts with no guarantee of pay until the shutdown ends. And no, these are people who are like, I got to make money. Like I need to, I can't show up and not have a confirmation that I'm going to be paid. I got to do something for my family. And so I don't blame them. But it also creates incredibly unsafe situations for us. So yeah.
What a time. All the more reason to sit my ass down.
Hello. Thank you. I'm glad I ain't got nowhere to be. Okay. Me and my pregnant butt are going to be in the house.
Exactly.
I'm sending my love to everybody else who doesn't have the luxury of being able to, not go anywhere right now. Sometimes you're traveling because of an emergency. You have right? For work, for family, for medical reasons. Like there's so many reasons why people need to travel. It's not always vacation. And so I know that's going to really mess up a lot of people's plans. But speaking of cash ruling everything around us, Nafisa Collier, WNBA great, has been publicly calling out WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, as she should. The WNBA has experienced meteoric growth. I mean, it has been incredible. And no, that growth is not all thanks to Caitlin Clark. Not to take anything away from the girl, but I mean, there are so many people who have contributed to the growth of the league. Players like Asia Wilson and Nafisa Collier, players like Angel Reese and Paige Beckers. Like there's so many people who contribute, but these players are often not seeing the fruit of their labors. You know, Angel Reese on her podcast said just the other day that the WNBA is her dream job, but it doesn't pay her nearly as much as the side work that she does, modeling, content creation, and doing various other things. And it doesn't seem like there's a sense of urgency to change that. There's a lot of taking these players for granted, putting their bodies on the line. They're getting injured left and right, and there's no real accountability from the top. And so Nafisa Collier is not having it. She called out the WNBA commissioner in a media run. She recently did a surprise sit down with former Vice President Kamala Harris, where she said, like, I was just fed up and I needed to say something. And I love the energy. I love the boldness. And I think we need more of that across fields, but especially in women's sports, which I think is a way where we see a lot of the issues of women in the workplace play out on a very large stage.
Yeah, it's because it couldn't have been hard. I mean, it couldn't have been easy, right? To speak up knowing that you're going to face potentially a lot of backlash from the organization and leadership that you so desperately want to be a part of, right? Like that has been your family, a place where you've been able to live out your dreams for so long. And I think that's one of the issues that I've always had with the women's NBA is this pretendness that the women aren't offering just as much talent and tenacity and entertainment as the NBA, and they should be compensated reflective of that. And, you know, somebody made a really good point about how one of the arguments that always comes up about women's NBA is, are they as profitable as the NBA? No, they're not. And that's by design, right? Like they intentionally have been cut out from deals, production deals, and from viewerships that would have enabled for them to build their brand for the last decade, and by ESPN and other platforms. So it is interesting to now see that over the last year and a half, 2 years, that we've really seen this interest, this influx of interest into women's NBA. And now the conversation is back. Like, how do we ensure that there's proper representation, that these players are receiving the adequate resources and compensation that they deserve for their talent, and that they don't have to work multiple jobs to do it, right? Like you have women NBA players having to go play in an international league to make it. And like, that's not fair when there's so much money being made off of their back and for their merge. So I'm excited to see this development and excited to see more women in the women's NBA and from outside the NBA and the women's NBA speaking up and speaking out about how important this is. So time will tell, but pay women accordingly and pay them well, and pay them often.
Yes.
So in my final headline for the day is the National Guard has officially arrived in Chicago. Chicago is the third largest city in the country. And now due to the Trump administration, the National Guard has been sent there to eliminate a very violent crime and just what Trump is describing as just a city that is being run by gang members and illegals, which is just not the case. You have the governor and the Chicago mayor pushing back and fighting the Trump administration in court because many people see this an overreach of the federal government and illegal to do so. And so I think this is just another example of the Trump using the National Guard as a scapegoat and as a tool, a weaponized tool to distract folks from things like the Epstein file and the fact that the Republicans are responsible for this government shutdown.
I think what's crazy about this moment is that, you know, the goalpost is constantly being moved. So the narrative that Trump was using to get Black people to vote for him was that he's not coming after us. And actually, we should be grateful that he's going after people who are also stealing our jobs, that are also threatening our children's lives and our safety. And so when I do talk to a rare conservative Black person who was kind of like absorbed into these xenophobic messages, is this idea that like, well, that's not going to affect me because I'm a citizen and I'm doing the right thing. And this is only going after criminals who came here illegally. And now look, people with blue passports, with no criminal records, are being terrorized in their city by these same ICE agents that are supposed to be protecting them. And it was never going to work for us because we are not who prioritizing and focused on. So I think it's a reminder not to fall for the propaganda, not to fall for the ploys, because we're not the target audience for any of this. When Trump says make America great again and safe again and all this other bullshit, he is not talking about us. And so this idea that we can rest and let stuff happen to other people is, we just need to reject that narrative, because they perfected this violence against us first. It will always come back around for us.
Oh, absolutely. We were always the target. And we were always the target. And hearing about kids being zip tied and being pulled out of their homes in the middle of the night, and elderly people being held in the cold and not being able to, put clothes on. It's pretty disgusting. So what a time for America. But I will say we're definitely showing our asses, and the mask is, the rose-colored glasses have been removed from the rest of the world. They're finally seeing what Black people have been saying for a long time, that we have serious, serious problems here, and we need serious, serious solutions to solve them. So we're going to take a quick break. You are watching On the Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. And then when we come back, we're going to dive deep into the legacy and the cost of anti-intellectualism.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase, and I'm here with a very important message. We are at a turning point in the Black community where we must have equity in the apps we use that scale to billions of dollars. But this time, we own the infrastructure, we own the culture, and we shape the future. And Fanbase is the future. Fanbase combines the free functionality of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube into an all-in-one platform built for the evolution of social media and monetization. With over 1.4 million users, that's real proof that we are shifting the conversation of tech ownership and equity for creators. So right now, I want you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. This marks a turning point in Black ownership of social media. If we don't take this opportunity to own social media right now, we will always be customers to our own creations. And that can't go on. So once again, go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. We must own the platforms where our voices live, our stories matter, and where our culture drives the world. Thank you.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. In this segment, we're talking about something that's creeping into our classrooms, our boardrooms, and our bookstores in America: the rise of anti-intellectualism. It's not just annoying, it's dangerous.
Yeah, let's just start with the fact that over 15,000 book bans have been documented in U.S. schools since July 2021. Last week was Banned Books Week. And what was so important is that we're not just talking about textbooks. Mm-hmm. What was made clear is that these are stories by Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, Bell Hooks, Anne Frank, books that have shaped us and helped us to see ourselves and one another.
Absolutely. And the kicker is over 26% of the books banned are biographies and biographies that feature Black historical figures. And that's not just a coincidence, right? That is a calculated decision because it erases people who were true leaders of our movements.
Yeah. Dangerous, calculated, strategic, exactly your point. They don't want us to learn about real people. It's not like this is, what is the agenda that they're protecting us from and not learning about the lives of civil rights leaders and historical figures. So we got to call it what it is. What we're witnessing is a coordinated effort to undermine truth, to discredit experts, to make people suspicious of education itself, to make us forget what past generations have fought for and how they were able to succeed. And like most bad trends in this country, Black people are always going to feel it first and worst.
Yep, and this is not a new phenomenon, right? Historically, Black folks are always criminalized in this country for learning to read. Literacy was so feared by enslaved that they made it illegal because they knew that those who were educated was on a pathway to discover their true power. And once you got your hands on that knowledge, you couldn't unsee it, right? You had to challenge it, you had to seek it. And that's what they're afraid of, is to know your history, is to know what you are so rightfully deserving of and what you should be fighting for.
Right. And they know that we've always challenged their lives across history. This is not new. From Harriet Jacobs secretly writing her autobiography in an attic while she was a fugitive enslaved person, to W.E.B. Du Bois founding the Crisis newspaper, to the Black Panther Party launching liberation schools. We have always used information as an act of resistance, as a way of mobilizing people and getting us to understand the cycle that we are in and how to stop being cogs in the machine. And they don't want that sort of information, not just amongst Black people, but they don't want us to share that with other communities. They don't want little white kids learning about Black liberation movements and how it could be a path to liberation for all of us.
No, absolutely. I mean, because think about it, 2025, we're seeing that fear resurface again, this time dressed up as parental rights or anti-wokeness or protecting the children. But we know what it really is. It's a full assault on the truth. And the fact is that over 10,000 books have been banned, according to in our US schools alone since July of 2021. Of those, 41% feature stories about LGBTQ characters, 36% feature stories about people of color. 26% of all book bans are biographies, as I mentioned earlier, about Black people. This is an erasure at the highest order and is intentional. It is a way that tells us that our stories don't matter and that we should acquiesce to the federal government deciding on what's in the best interest of our students. I also want to say that I recently just saw a video of a group of elementary school students. One of them was a little Black boy who was sitting in the front, and the teacher read to him or started to sing to him the happy birthday song. And that seemed like a cute enough video, right? Like, but then she turned that around to sing to him the fun version of the happy birthday song, calling him a monkey as he is surrounded by his white classmates. And I just want to say that if kids are young enough to experience racism, they're damn sure young enough and old enough to be able to learn about it and to be able to push back against it.
Yeah, this idea that kids are too young,
too sensitive.
It's mind-blowing though, because our young people have to experience it.
Yep.
And their young people can't learn about it. Our young people are dealing with family separation in courts. I mean, you've got toddlers and 5-year-olds who are being represented because their parents are being taken away, who are having to translate. You've got, these historical moments of like Black kids, brown kids, indigenous kids have always had to experience the brunt of racism while their white peers get to go on living in delusion. And that delusion is what keeps people saying it's I think it's not as bad as you say it is, because you haven't had to live it the way that our kids have had to live it. I'm really glad that you mentioned that. It's not just about books. It's also about teachers being threatened, about professors being silenced, about student activists being labeled as extremists, and about an entire generation of people being so out of touch with all of that they don't feel a need to speak up. And what we have to do is bring the fight to the doors and to the libraries, to the schools of all Americans, so that it becomes a collective problem. I just got into a debate with a Black person online about this, who was saying, well, why are you so focused on these book bans and whatnot? Like, why do you even trust them to teach your kids? And it's like, I know my kid is getting a certain education at home. I'm not worried about what my son is learning at home. I'm worried about what their kids are learning at home. And the reality is, if my son has to get the talk about everything and has to be hyper politically aware and then exist in a world where no one else around him understands his experience, then I'm setting him up for failure. So yes, I am going to demand that curriculums look different. I am going to demand that books are available in libraries and classrooms, and that teachers are able to talk about these things in depth, because it's not just about my kid. It's about all of our children and who they grow up to be as adults based on the information they did or did not receive when they were younger.
Yeah, and these things don't happen in isolation, right? Like, we are living in community with one another. I can teach my child as much. I don't have any kids, but I could teach my child as much as I want. But if he still has to interact, to your point, with other kids who are not as well educated and versed about the state of the world, but also more importantly, the state of the history of the world, it puts, to your point, your child at a disadvantage. In fact, earlier this year, a Florida principal was fired after parents complained that the sixth graders was shown Michelangelo's David sculpture, which is a sculpture of Michelangelo's David, and he is nude, right? It is art. He was nude. And it's just interesting that people are complaining about something like nudity in the sense of like experiencing how kids can experience art when they have bodies, right? That they are curious about, that they have to live with. And it just goes to show that it's not just books, that it's art, it's science, it's history on the chopping blocks that are really challenging white, like fragility, like their sensibility, and it's just like, grow the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, we've experienced so much in this country, and y'all can't take a sculpture who is new. Like, if they would have went to any museum, they would have seen.
Right. I was like, so keep your kids out of Paris and London, because all the sculptures look just like that. Like, come on, what are we talking about? But that, to your point, is the fragility, and it shows how ridiculous it's getting, which is ironic because this is coming from the side of free speech who calls us snowflakes. And that we take everything too sensitively, but they can't handle hearing the word Black in a classroom and acknowledging that people experience the world in different ways. Like,
or that little David might have two moms. God forbid little David has two parents.
God forbid. Jeez. But we're seeing this not just, because I think the excuse that gets made at those younger ages is that they're just so young, but we're seeing the same thing in higher ed, which continues to show that it's not about someone being too young. They just don't want the conversations happening at all. In 2023, Ron DeSantis eliminated all DEI funding from Florida's public universities. So this would have been, adults being able to grapple with the real world around them. And other Republican-led states quickly followed suit. So we're seeing this ripple effect where more than 1 in 4 Fortune 500 companies have scaled back or eliminated their DEI departments. 96% of college students say they self-censor in class to avoid backlash. And these are classes that, by the way, are not mandated for every college student. I can just speak from my experience that a lot of the classes that I took that were grappling with Black history, Indigenous history, queer history, critical race theory, or intersectionality were electives. They were not mandated for the average student. So now we're having our options limited for what I would opt into, when the reality is that people are not being forced to really reckon with the world around them at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what keeps me up at night, right? Like, is being gaslit into thinking that anti-racism is divisive, that actual harm is being done by those scrubbing Black history from the curriculum. They don't want to heal. They just want to rewrite the history, right? Like, they don't want to be held there. They don't want their ancestors to be held accountable for the reality of the situation. They just want to pretend it never happened.
Yeah. And that's really so spot on. That's exactly what this is. And their favorite tool is disinformation. Suddenly slavery had benefits and Jim Crow was overblown and Black Lives Matter is terrorism. I mean, it's textbook authoritarianism and revisionist history, where you get to erase the past so you can control the future, where the victors get to tell a different story so that they don't look like the villains that they were.
Yeah, and that's the part that I think connects directly to the justice movement. If we can't teach about enslavement, then how can we talk about mass incarceration, right? Like, if we don't discuss Palestine, then how are we going to build global solidarity? But that's the thing, they don't want us to. If we can't name whiteness, then how do we dismantle it, right? Like, we all actually suffer under these really archaic structures and institutions that prevent all of us from being able to reach our full potential. Like, it's not just Black people who are suffering in America. There are poor white folks in all parts of this country who can barely keep the lights on, and they continue to think that their proximity to whiteness will save them. And it has never saved them in the history of this country, because all you will have is those at the top continuing to suck resources and our labor and our energy and our aspirations and our dreams from ourselves, that will leave us a shell of who we once thought we could be.
Yeah. Oh, preach. You're saying it all, girl. And I think that leads us with the question, just like, how do we fight back?
Yep.
Now that we know what the strategy is, we know what the blueprint is, we know how belligerent they are about pushing this agenda through, how do we reclaim space for truth while protecting those who are bold enough to tell it?
No, absolutely. And I'm super excited that when we come back from break, we will have Wisdom Cole from the NAACP to help us dig into just that. Because make no mistake, this is a generational battle that we're not going to back down from. No. And neither should you.
Yeah. Again, you're watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network. Stay with us so you can be a part of that conversation.
They said the quiet part out loud. Black votes are a threat, so they erased them. After the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013, Republican legislatures moved fast. New voter ID laws, polling place shutdowns, purges of black voters from the rolls. Trump's Justice Department didn't stop it, they joined in. In 2018, his DOJ backed Ohio's voter purge system, a scheme that disproportionately erased black voters. Their goal, erase black votes and political power. Yeah, that happened. These are the kinds of stories that we cover every day on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Subscribe on YouTube and download the Black Star Network app. Support fact-based independent journalism that centers African Americans and the issues that matter to our community.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. We are so lucky to have Wisdom Cole joining us today. Wisdom is the Senior National Director for Advocacy and the National Director of the Youth and College Division at the NAACP. He's been leading efforts to mobilize and educate young people across the country, fighting voter suppression and advocating for racial justice in education and beyond. And so he knows a little something about what students in classrooms are experiencing right now. So Wisdom, welcome to The Other Side of Change.
Yeah. And correct us if we're wrong. You're the former National Director of Youth and College Division, right? Yep. He's moving on up. He's adulting.
The reward for good work is more work. So
well, we love to see it because we need the truth tellers and the people on the front lines. So thank you for taking your place.
Yes, absolutely. And you have been a truly outspoken voice, not just in your organizing efforts, but also across a multitude of platforms. So we were super excited to have you on the show. And, we've been talking about the rise of anti-intellectualism, the book banning, the crackdown on campus organizing, curriculum censorship. Why now, right? Like, what are conservatives afraid of in regards to like telling the true history of America and giving people the tools and resources to show up as their full self? What do you think this means for a person like you and your work?
Yeah, no, times are hard. But first I want to say thank you so much for bringing me onto the platform. It's a pleasure to be here with both of y'all. I've been inspired by both of your work. The time is difficult for young people, for students, for Black folks. To be honest, I actually saw a lot of this play out when I was a teacher in San Francisco. I used to teach at a small school for equity called June Jordan School for Equity. And we saw a film called Precious Knowledge that documented the 2011 struggle that young people were dealing with in Arizona around Mexican-American studies and working to fight to save that. And even most recently in SFUSD, if y'all know this, across the state of California, high school students have the opportunity, a part of their A through G requirements, to learn ethnic studies. And under the cover of night, the superintendent was actually trying to remove that because parents had advocated to take out ethnic studies because it was making the white students feel bad. And so we're seeing this across America, from our high schools to our middle schools to our college campuses. And what's happening is this is a coordinated backlash to progress, right? We are seeing that as we are making the movement for racial justice a reality, after the Black Lives Matter movement, after, the uprising in 2020, we're seeing the gains that are happening for students, for teachers, and for young people. They are fighting back against that. They're fighting back against history. They are working to remove real narratives and the truth about who we are, because at the end of the day, conservatives realized that they couldn't win a debate on facts, right? Yeah. When we tell the truth, right, and we shame the devil, they were losing that fact. They were losing that war. And so they started lying, right? They started turning against knowledge itself. They started using our language against us, right? Remember when we were all woke and the woke movement and all that kind of stuff? Now everything is anti-woke, right? When we were talking about including diversity, equity, inclusion, in higher education, now it's anti-DEI, right? All this are efforts to suppress the truth because truth empowers people, right? When we give people the opportunity to learn about themselves, they have confidence, they have belief in themselves. They want to do more to actually change that. And so we have to double down, or what I like to say, as Nipsey Hussle said, we have to double up, right? We have to ensure that there is civic education, there's more storytelling, that there's more campus organizing. We have to provide the resources necessary for young people to take back their truth.
Yes, taking back the truth. That's so critical. And I know that you've worked with, I love that you use a Nipsey Hussle reference. That's, always going to resonate with me. Across the last, several years that you've devoted to student organizing and national organizing, you've worked with thousands of students across the country. What have you heard from them about how safe or unsafe they feel in raising their voices on campus in this moment?
Yeah, a lot of young people feel unsafe, right? And justly so. I think about a young leader who graduated from the University of South Carolina, Courtney McLean, that I got to work with very deeply last year, where on her campus, conservative students held a roast of Kamala Harris, disrespecting the vice president in a very crude manner. They even invited extremists, founders of the Proud Boys, to be present on campus. And so as the students were advocating to ensure that their campus was safe from discrimination, from holding protests, they even advocated to the university to not let this event happen. The university couldn't stop it. And so the students who were organizing, who were protesting against it, actually after the event became the target, right? Specifically young Black women. Online and in person, were being harassed for actually working to do something to make the campus a more safe environment. And so it's important to recognize that young people are organizing, but they're not stopping, right? Even in the face of struggle, even in the face of attack, they are still working to ensure that their voices aren't silenced. We're seeing this in the protests for Palestine, for racial equity, using social media to call out injustice. All this is what we are building. All this is a part of building an infrastructure, ensuring that there's legal support, organizing support, training, and community to ensure that young people can meet this moment, because they are being faced with an onslaught of attack, right? From threats of bombs, from conservatives coming to their campus to rile them up. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but young people need the support from seasoned organizers, from veterans who have the resources to support them.
I always think about when people say they want to stay out of it, or that they want to create equal space for folks to be able to speak up. It's like, who comfort are we prioritizing, right? Because it might be the comfort of white students in order to not tell the truth, but Black people are now physically, mentally, and socially unsafe, right, to be able to move throughout the world. And I always am conscious of the fact that so many of us face backlash for being truth tellers. I want to know from your perspective, how do we resist the erasure of our history in a space, in a future that is defined by our dreams, knowing what our history has laid the foundation to enable for us to do?
We know that every time Black folks have demanded equity, freedom, justice, truth, always been a backlash, right? And we also know that anytime that we liberate the most marginalized, everybody benefits, even white people, right? We see this in Reconstruction, came Jim Crow, after civil rights, came mass incarceration. I think the difference is now is what we see on this digital scale, right? Censorship is not just happening in policy, but it's also happening in our algorithms, right? Young voices for racial justice. I don't know if it's happening on y'all accounts, but it's happening on my accounts. Anytime I'm speaking out about something that's real, I'm not getting as much engagement. And so the shadow banning of Black creators, of Black activists, of Black artists, people who are pushing those messaging, right? Because at a certain point, it was an opportunity for corporate America to make more money, right? In the midst of 2020, when everybody was having this awakening, those things were being promoted. Now those things are being censored, and so resistance really means investing in truth-telling infrastructures. What do I mean by that? We have to partner with libraries. We have to partner with youth organizations. We have to provide freedom books, right? Or freedom book libraries where folks have access and opportunity. We have to ensure that storytellers still have the mic to be able to share the untold stories of our community. I think back to what Angela Davis talks about. I had the privilege to have her as a professor emeritus at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And she always talks about freedom being a constant struggle. And that means that we have to continue to resist. We have to continue to organize. We have to continue to educate. But more importantly, we have to consistently reimagine and imagine what the future can look like, right? We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And it's important that young people remember that and recognize that by learning history, right? I'm a big fan of Sankofa. For us to move forward, we have to look back. We have to make sure that we are studying the elders and how they moved, taking all the great things that they did, but also using the updated systems of technology, social media, and the currency that we have when it comes to influence in this day and age.
So true. What a gift to get to learn from Angela Davis directly, and why it's so important to have our elders around. But I could not agree more with the importance of remembering, and also remembering that these elders were also young activists once. And so, they were not always grown people with fully, developed, like they were also figuring things out and fumbling, and they just fumbled in the right directions. Are there current examples of young people resisting this censorship that you're excited about, that we can learn from and uplift in this moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And even just like a quick plug on the elder piece, right? This past August was Black August, and I took that very seriously in terms of the practice of Black August, of studying, training, fighting, and winning. And I actually reread the autobiography of Assata Shakur, and so rest in power to a freedom fighter, but seeing the way that she struggled in her activism, in her learning. I love the way that, the book was written from past and present, kind of meeting almost two different people in one moment when all those things happen. And so to look at those things and see how that's actually being played out in real time now, as students are being asked to fight back against the Stop Woke Act, as students are, protesting and walking out of classrooms because their lives are literally at stake because of gun violence, right? We saw young leaders in the state of Tennessee, like State Representative Justin Pearson and State Representative Justin Jones, who were expelled from the legislature for speaking out against this, and are still organizing and still fighting, right? Currently working with State Representative Justin Pearson to fight back against the big data centers that are polluting our community. Right? We're seeing at HBCUs, in the midst of all of these bomb threats, in reaction to the murder of Charlie Kirk, as well as the presence of Black conservatives coming to campus during homecoming, where people are trying to celebrate and enjoy themselves, and you want to come and bait them and create viral moments when this is supposed to be a place for community, right? Young people are organizing, right? Immediately after those bomb threats happen, folks were jumping on calls. They were talking about ways in which they can protect themselves, can raise this as a security issue. Young people are organizing right now, recognizing that they're not trying to feed into the misinformation that is trying to be promoted on campus, or this opportunistic moment, but saying about ways like how we can organize our own events, our own education, and ensuring that people are clear about what the mission is, right? we have to learn that organizing doesn't always need permission, right? It's about ensuring that we are claiming space, that we're fighting for what's ours. And if they're not going to give it to us, we're going to take it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so interesting that you mentioned folks who are going on college campuses to debate students. These are grown men, the vast majority of time, who are growing on college campuses, grown white conservative men going on college campuses to not really debate, right? Like, I was a former debater, I was a former mock trialer, and this is not real debate. This is like grown men coming on to harass and antagonize students, and to, in many cases, get students to almost debate their own humanity. Like, why do I have to debate whether or not I, as a Black woman, deserve to live and have the same resources as anyone in this country? And I think that's one of the things that's extremely frustrating. For our listeners' wisdom, if for those who are scared to speak up and speak out, what advice would you give them as someone like yourself who started as a young organizer who now has made it his life mission to align his values, but also his job in doing this work?
Yeah, it's important, again, to learn from our elders. Our elders have been through these things time and time again. I think it's important for us to study, to read, right? As we're talking about the rise of anti-intellectualism, and we're seeing the defunding of the Department of Education, we're seeing curriculum being moved back. We have to study, we have to read, right? When I was a part of the African Black Coalition in the state of California, which I now sit on the board of, part of being in leadership was there was a set of books that we had to read to show that we had a political understanding or political education, right? And making sure that there was a baseline of this is where we're operating from, right? This is what we understand. In a world where everybody's an expert, if you have a platform, if you say it with enough bravado and say it with enough, je ne sais quoi, or whatever you may call it, people will believe it because you post it. Research, right? Back in the day, they taught us how to cite sources. If this doesn't sound right, if this sounds funny, go look it up, right? Have a couple sources behind it to ensure that this is actually valid, right? It's important for us to make sure that we know what we're talking about, and not being afraid, right? Because when you are armed with knowledge, when you are armed with education, you have all the tools at your disposal to fight back against the oppressor, fight back against all of the attacks that are happening to young people, to Black people in this moment.
Yeah. And where can people find you and stay connected to your work?
Yeah, follow me on Instagram at Words of Wisdom 27. I be on X and other platforms sometimes, but anything is at Words of Wiz 27. I'll be spitting out a lot of knowledge. Also started a Substack. Definitely want to make sure that we are having discourse. I'm really in a place in my life where I'm trying to be as creative as possible, talk about the movement as much as possible in a way where we are thinking about new ideas, because we need new ideas to face the most difficult problems that we are facing in this moment in time.
Say that. Yes, say that. Thank you so much for joining us, for encouraging our listeners, and for just being you and bringing that wisdom to every room you enter.
Look at that. Okay, another pun. Bringing the wisdom with the wisdom.
You're making it easy. You're making it easy for me.
I love it. Thanks for joining the show, and we'll definitely have you on again soon.
Yes.
So pleasure.
Appreciate y'all. Peace.
So for those who are watching, you're watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shutdown.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage. as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. If you remember nothing else from this episode, let it be clear that freedom, literacy go hand in hand. And the moment we stop reading, questioning, and organizing, we stop resisting.
Yeah, so true. So whether it's a banned book, a gag order on a teacher, or a student silenced in class, every act of censorship is an attack on justice. We have been here before and we have always fought back, and we're not going to stop now. Again, last week was Banned Books Week. You can go to PEN America's website and find a list of those banned books and try and read as many as possible. If you live in a community that has free libraries, or if there's a way for you to buy books and donate them to young people around you, make that happen, have conversations, but do not let them erase our history.
Absolutely. So continue to support teachers, protect truth tellers, and build learning spaces that reflect the dignity that we all deserve. You are watching The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Until next time, keep pushing.